Well, hello there and welcome to this session. This is the Let's Build a Fire app where we are going to take a look at the Firely Net SDK for Fire in order to be able to create our Fire applications. That can be a client-side app, can be a server-side app. It doesn't really matter. You can use the SDK for both. But of course, in this tutorial session, or Let's Build session, I should say, we are just going to focus on a simple app first. And then you can hopefully take that knowledge and build your own bigger apps. I am Mirjam Baltus. I work for Firely. I am a Fire trainer, but at Firely we do more than just DevDays. We also have the Firely.net SDK, of course, and we have a development team for that. And we build tools, of course, 100% Fire stuff that we do. So whatever you need, please, if you have any Fire questions, come to Firely and we will be happy to help you out. This session is a session where we will not go into a presentation, but we are going to hopefully get you to code along with us. So I will start out first, this first session, and then we will switch over for the second session where Marco will do a bit as well and hopefully, give you some nice, interesting other things. In the first session, we will look at how to use the model, the Fire model in the Firely SDK for your application and look at some existing data that we have prepared for you, because that's something that we have seen in practice that is something you will run into. You have existing custom data in some kind of proprietary format, or perhaps in a SQL database or in some other kind of database format. But usually it's not one-on-one Fire. Of course, unless you start all anew and you don't have any legacy data, which would be really nice. But in practice, of course, we do see that a lot of data is out there. And what you find is that you usually need to go out and map that data that you have to the Fire resources that you are required to communicate. So in this first session, we will focus on that, looking at custom data, turning them into Fire resources, and then Marco will tell you about checking those resources, validating them, and about communication of those resources. Well, we are going to be the client-side app communicating with a Fire server, but you could, of course, also do the things the other way around. So hopefully you have your Visual Studio somewhere on your machine and opened up. In the Q&A, I have put in a link to a GitHub repo. So I will share my screen and we will see what we can do in these 45 minutes. I do encourage you to just unmute yourselves if you have any questions. I don't mind to be interrupted at any point in time. You can also, of course, put a question in the Q&A, and while I'm talking, Marco will check that. And if Marco's talking, I will check the Q&A. So just whatever you want, please do let us know what you have as questions. And that's, of course, this is just a building session. We are going to build things together. So the GitHub repo is this one, the DevDays 2021 June, Let's Build. So that link is in the Q&A as well. And I have prepared a little bit of a sample solution in the session 1 branch that you see right here. And that's also what the link leads you to. We have sample data, and then we have a sample solution that already is capable of ingesting that data. Because it's just a CSV, we didn't want to make it too difficult. So we have a CSV, we are going to read it in, and that's already in the code. And what we are going to take a look at is that mapping part, so we can get to know the Firely SDK and the Fire model that is in there. So that's the repo. Please do find the link in the Q&A. You can download that, but you could also just start out with a completely empty solution, as long as you have that CSV file. That's the most important one, because that's the thing that we need to read in and then map to Fire. So this is the contents of that CSV file, and you see on top, of course, we have the names of the fields, and then we have all kinds of data. There is an explanation as well on our GitHub repo of that data. So let me just scroll down. The exercise text that we've created is here. So you can also do this later on again as well. Of course, you will not have the live support and answering that we can do, but you could take your time and read through it again later on. But in that CSV, as you can see, we have something called a sequence number. We have a timestamp, then we have some patient details and some data about white, red blood cells and hemoglobin. So that's all in that CSV file. We have taken this data from the CDC, and then James Agnew from the Happy team that has added some patient data to make it useful for our exercise. So that's what's in there, that whole bunch here. So there's a patient ID, a patient name, etc. That's all in there. So what we do in our solution is we take the CSV and then we read it in. So in order to do so, I have added a library called CSV helper because I could find some useful copyable code on the internet to get that done. So that just makes sure that I can read in that data, and then I have my model in there. I have created a model for those particular columns in my CSV file. And I can read it in, and that leads to me having a bunch of records in here. So that model, well, that is the same thing that you've just seen in the text, but now we have created a .NET model out of those, just all strings. So if we need to do anything with, for example, dates or something that's in there, we might need to cast that. But this is the basic model that we have in our CSV. So we can work with these records, and now we can take those line by line, and then we can map the data that's in there. So in order to do so, to map that to FHIR, of course, what we need to have is the Firely SDK. So, well, I have already put it in, of course, in this project, but it's just a NuGet package that you can use. So if you go to your NuGet package manager and you would search on hl7.fire, so suppose you are working on a clean project there, you can find all these hl7.fire libraries here. You have to choose what FHIR version you are working on. And in this case, I have added the hl7 FHIR.r4 library because that's the current official FHIR version. But if you need to, you can also take a look at STU3 or the STU2 still, although that's not maintained anymore, that library, but it's still there for all the projects that are out there. Well, Marco can tell you more about how that works when we are going to move to the next FHIR version. But the team will make sure that if a new version is released of FHIR, that there's also support for that in the libraries, of course, plus some previews when there's a version coming up but not finalized yet. So you add your flavor or your version of FHIR, that library, you add that to your project. And in my case, that was this one, the hl7.fire.r4. So that's already added. So if you download that solution from our GitHub repo, you get this dependency already in there. So what I'm going to take a look at is my program again, and what I want is to create a list of patients because I have all these records, and per line in my per record I have a patient in there. So I want to create a patient list, and you can see I use the patient object here, which is just that FHIR model, and of course I have a using statement for that. I'm using hl7.fire.model in order to get the complete FHIR model, all of the FHIR resources and data types in my project. So I have my patient list created here, and the same for observations, because that white blood cell count and red blood cell count, that's all an observation about that patient. It's some blood work being done on the patient, and then something comes out of that. So that would end up in a FHIR observation. So I want to create those FHIR resources. And since I'm going to do this all in one go, reading in my whole CSV, that's why I create a list of both of those things. And then I have the whole set of information, hopefully, together. So that's what I want. I want to get a list of patients. I want to get a list of observations. And what I have done also is add a mapper class in order to, for each record, map the details that's in that record to my FHIR resources. So I have a get patient here, which would map the patient data out of my record to a FHIR patient, which is then stored in this path here. Now, I also have done something that you don't need to do right away, but I have done a check here to see in my patient list whether that patient already exists based on its technical ID. Now, if you create new FHIR resources that you then send out to a FHIR server, your resource will usually not have a technical ID. But when we need to link two resources together with a FHIR reference, then we need to have something like that, at least in order to point, for example, from observation to patient. In this case, my patient number is in my CSV file, could also be some kind of field in your database table holding some unique number for that particular patient. And in my list, I want to prevent duplicate patients from existing. So I just add them only when that particular patient with that patient key does not exist yet. And then the only other thing that I do is count those patients in my list, and I put them just in a simple write line statement here in order to be able to get a count of the patients in my CSV. Now, there's no real mapping done yet, so let's take a look at that mapper class. So I'll go to that one. And the only thing that I've done is map that patient ID, that number in my custom data, to the ID field in patient. So I'm creating a new patient, and this is where, of course, we use the model again. That's the FHIR patient. And if I now have that patient, I can do all kinds of things with it. I can just do something like this and have your IntelliSense work for you. You can check to see all of these fields that exist in the FHIR resource, because of course that's the model that you get from the SDK. It already knows all of this, so it will give me the option to add an ID. It will give me the option to add an address. I can add a birthday, things like that. So that's all things that I can add to my patient, to my FHIR patient. So of course, it's important to know your model in FHIR as well. So both your custom model, you need to know your custom data, and the FHIR data as well, the FHIR model. So let me just go to the FHIR website. I already opened it up. So just hl7.org/FHIR in this case. And I'm going to check the resource list in order to find the patient. So that's here. So if I click on that one, you should be able to see all of those fields that are available for patient. The technical ID, by the way, is not on here because this just lists all of the fields that are the standard data content of the patient resource type. But if you click on domain resource, you go one level up in hierarchy. You do not see it anymore in the actual patient field list that we have in our model in my Visual Studio just now. But you can click on that one and you will see that there are extra fields available on each FHIR resource. So you have these fields here: text, contained, extension, and modifier extension. And then we also have domain resource deriving from resource. And if you look at that one, that actually gives you that technical ID. So you can see that one here. That's the ID field that I have already filled in my mapper class. There's also metadata in order to say something about a profile that this particular resource might conform to, and some other fields. So the patient resource type and all other resource types, by the way, they inherit these fields. And that's why we see them nicely embedded in our patient model in the SDK. So just for those of you who were wondering where that came from. So going back to patient, we see those other fields as well. And for each of these fields, you will see that the model has them listed in there. And you will be able to see those data types as well. So for example, in our patient, we have a name, and that's a 0 to star list of things. That means that in our model in the SDK, you also will find that there's a list on there. And the human name data type in FHIR is what we call a complex data type. It contains subfields. So in the SDK, you also have the human name data type already prepared for you. And then you can use that to fill the subfields of that. So let's take a look at an example there. So go back to my Visual Studio here. And what we want to do with my patient, we do have a name, right? So check your CSV. There's a patient ID, which I have already put in the ID field. But now we also have a family name and a given name. So let's take a look at mapping those into our patient. So we can take a look at patient, and then we have the name field, of course. And that's a list. So what we need to do is make sure that we add to that list in order to be able to add a new human name to it. You don't have to initialize that list. That's something the SDK already does for you. So even if it's empty right now or non-existent, the SDK will make sure that this does not lead to an error, fortunately. And I'm all about happy coding, so that's a nice thing. But you can see if I, well, it's a bit small now, but you can see if I add this, then you can see we can add a human name. So we need to add a new human name to that particular name list in my patient. We can do that in several ways. So let's just take a look at creating that one first. So I'm going to just do this, create a new human name. And now we can, of course, fill those fields, but there's also for some of those classes, there's those fluent methods that you could use. Well, it's a matter of preference whether you want to use those or not. But for some, we have those convenience methods. So we could say with this human name, I want to add the given name. And there's that method with given. And now what we have is our record here will have that given name, right? So I can just add that patient given name to that. So now I create a new human name where I add the given name of my patient in the record. And I also want to add the family name, so I can do an, oops, I have to do it correctly, and family there in order to, oh, my backspace sometimes removes two characters at the same time. So I want to add the family name as well, so I can add from my record the patient's family name. So now, of course, because I have created a little bit of a bigger font, we move out of the visible part here. I wanted to add some column there. So this is one way of creating a name. By using the FHIR representative of that complex data type, and for each of the complex data types, you will see that equivalent in the model in the SDK. And in this case, I have used the fluent notation to be able to add to that. I will also be able to create this differently. Of course, we could do that without using a fluent notation. But then we also will need to take into account that the given name in the patient's human name is again a list. So if we create a new human name and then we want to add a given name to that, we need to add that to the given name list. So it's a little bit, well, more coding if you want, or at least more lines in order to get to the exact contents. So well, in this case, I do like the fluent notation here. Once we have the name, we can, of course, use that and add that to our patient name list. Now, we also will see sometimes that in the FHIR resources, we can have fields that can only take a particular list or one value from a list of values. So one of the other things in my CSV was the patient's gender. So I want to add that as well. We want to map that to the patient gender field in FHIR. So you can see that we have a gender here, but already you can see from the pop-up here that that's mentioning something called administrative gender. So let's again switch to the FHIR website where we can see the patient. And then you can see for the gender field, if I can find it further up here, for the gender field, you have an administrative gender list. And it's a required list, meaning that you have to take one of the values from that list. In this case, the values are also listed in this display here in the description. But in order to be sure, always do click on that list itself, do click on that name in order to check which values are possible. Of course, the SDK knows these values as well. For all of those fixed lists where it says required, the SDK will have an enumeration added to the model in order to be able to use that to fill in your data. So we want to fill in male, female, other, or unknown for those genders. So that's what we want to add, but of course we have to, well, we can use that enumeration. As you can see, we have to add one of those 4 options if we want to fill in a gender. So we would have to do, of course, a check on the actual data that we have, the custom data. So if it is male, then we can do this, fill in the administrative gender male, but we do have to do an if statement here. So let me check the patient gender field. And I don't know by heart what's in there. So it's an F or an M. And of course, you could do a switch statement on that if you want to, but let me just do it quickly like that. So that should give me a mapping of the male gender. And of course, I would add to that with the female as well. And then I would use the administrative gender .female. And of course, you can do all kinds of things around this, right? So this is just an example of simply filling in a field where we have looked at the CSV and know we only have M and F. But of course, you want to make your own implementation more robust for whenever you encounter a value in there that's not known to you or to your code, or perhaps if there's no value in that particular column, you might want to catch that as well before you start mapping and think that you have done everything. But well, I'm all about happy coding in this particular exercise or this example here. So that's what I have done here, and I would add that to I would add an extra line for the females, and then I would be done. So that's a first part here. So are we all still with us? Are there any questions at this point in time about what we are doing?
No questions on the Q&A, so that's fine.
Yeah, so again, please do unmute yourselves if you want to just interrupt or want to ask us something about this, and we will be happy to take some time to answer those questions. By the way, what I didn't tell you is I do this first session just mapping the data and taking a look at the model. And then Marco is doing the second one. In between, we have half an hour of switching time if you want to switch to another session somewhere. And of course, people could come in for the second session. You're all here already, which makes me very happy. But there might be other people that couldn't join this one and want to join the second one.
So, can you guys hear me?
Yes,
we can.
Yeah. So a quick question would be like, you know, so if there is a resource in DSTU3 or the previous versions, and is there any, I mean, like, you know, if it's a drastic change for R4, is there any tool or something like that which we can do, you know, or do we have to rewrite the code completely?
Yeah, so there's no tool as far as I know. You would have to check, and there is a way to check what the differences are. That's the nice thing, but the not so nice thing is that you would have to be aware of those changes and then change them in code yourself. So there's no real viable code or tool yet that can convert those two. There were some initiatives, I think, but it's not something that was too easy, unfortunately.
So where can we see the comparison between the previous version and the R4 and DSTU3?
That would be I'm still on the R4 site, right? So I'm looking at patient. There's this nice tab here that's called R3 diff. So if you click on that one, you can see the differences between those two versions. There's also a full difference, but the link is on each of those pages. So this is just for patient, but also other resource types.
We can only check on schema level, but not on the code level.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, got it.
And by the way, resources are also denoted by an N, like normative. That means that they will never change again in the future, only adding properties to that, but not changing the properties anymore.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's that maturity level. In R4, we have the first couple of maturity or mature resource types. So they will not change without being backwards compatible anymore, but other resources might still have those breakthroughs.
Thanks.
Okay, good. So, yeah, good questions there. In between, we have half an hour of the switching sessions, right? But we will keep this particular session open because the second session will be held in the same room. So any one of you who wants to stay on and wants to just code a little bit yourselves and try things, please be my guest and stay with us. And Marco and me, we will stay as well, and we will make sure that we can get some time to answer everything that you might have in between. So Sloan, I see that you unmuted there. Do you have a question?
I did. Line 17, you guys look like they're using a builder pattern. So if I didn't have the patient given name, that's a bad example because but if I did or didn't have a property that may be coming in as optional, am I still able to use the builder pattern to, if not string empty record patient given name, then add the builder line? Are we still able to do that with that builder pattern?
Do you mean this fluent notation here?
So if the record, if you wanted to put an if string empty or null around the record patient given name, right? Because
I would probably myself, I wouldn't do it like this. So but you can of course use any pattern that you would need in order to make sure that your code doesn't break on the data that you get. So if you do expect null values inside of the records, then I would do an extra check, but I would probably not use this particular fluent notation. I would just start out with a new human name and then add to the given list if I have given names, add to the family.
Use the setters, not the builder. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, so, well, as I said, you have to make sure, of course, that your code is robust, but for demo purposes, I do not have to do so. So I never do anything like try this and catch any exceptions. Well, I do that if I do action programming, but in a demo like this, I don't put that in, but you would usually do that sometimes.
That's why demos are fun. Happy path.
Happy path indeed. And fingers crossed as well.
Yeah, so I could very well have some problem in my CSV and I'll break and crash my code. But of course, this is again still just a simple example. So I've added that, and I have prepared a more fleshed out solution, which I haven't pushed to the GitHub repo yet, but I will do so in between these two sessions for any of you who wants to see this get some ideas. And there's an example of not using this fluent notation, but using the extra steps in there to get this done as well. So So that will be in there. So we have now mapped these particular fields in my CSV that I have available to my patient. What you would also still need to do is check your FHIR model. So check the FHIR patient on the website or in the profile that you need to conform to for any mandatory fields. Because, well, they are set to mandatory. That means that my FHIR data would not be valid if I don't fill them in. Marco will, of course, detail how you can try and see that in your code, whether you have made any mistakes there or errors. But of course, it's good to always check. Now, I have done quite a lot of FHIR training courses, so I know that a patient doesn't have any mandatory fields, by default at least, the standard FHIR patient. So we can leave it at this. For observation, though, it's a different matter because the observation does have some mandatory fields. So even if that's not in your data, in your CSV, you need to think about what you have to then fill in for those mandatory fields. I have this this particular observation here as well, where I've just said, okay, new observation and return that. It's completely empty, but we would want to make sure that this actually gets to be the observation for the white blood cell count. Now, I've already helped you out a little bit here because I've looked up the LOINC code that is indicating that this would be an observation about white blood cell counts. And there's also a display value there and the system and the unit for the thing that you want to add to as a value to this observation. So these things, they usually come in some kind of implementation guide or by looking at what kind of data you need to map and searching what's done, you could find these kind of things if no one has already mandated something or has put in some example. So I've done that. I've given you a little bit of implementation guidance, and now we could map the observation the same way as we have mapped the patient. So we have created the observation, and observations always have a code in order to indicate what kind of observation this is. So I could have the white blood cell count observation, and I can add a code. Now that code is of type codable concept, which again is one of those complex data types in FHIR. And actually, if you look at that one, the codable concept takes a list of codings, and those codings, they contain the actual code value plus the system of that, where the code comes from. So in this case, that would be the LOINC value. So what we want to do here is create a new codable concept. But again, the SDK helps you out because we have an overload here where we can have the system and the code already filled in. The SDK will make sure that this gets to be a level deeper in the FHIR hierarchy, put in that coding, and then add it to the list of codings. So that helps you out and you don't have to move into that a little bit deeper yourselves. So that could be really useful to get one coding into a codable concept right away. So what we want to do is make sure that we add the code for the white blood cell count, and we want to have the LOINC code system. So LOINC is http loinc.org. And again, this is something that you could find out by looking at some examples that already have LOINC codes, or perhaps it would be in your implementation guide somewhere. The second thing is the code. Well, the code is also listed here. So this is nothing that comes from my CSV, because in my CSV, I just have the value, the count itself, but not the actual code that is part of this. So that's why I put that into the information. We can also have the display value filled in nicely. Just copy this one. So I hope I was nice enough for you there. Getting you to create that codable concept. So now I have the code filled in. But of course, an observation also usually has a value. We want to have that blood cell count in there. So we want to add a value. And now it gets interesting, because if we look at value here, this is of type data type. Well, that's not an actual FHIR data type. It's the parent of all data types, if you want. And that's because the value field is a choice property. Now, I don't know if you have heard of choice properties. Probably Simone in her introduction to FHIR talk mentioned those, but you have to make a choice of what you want to fill in. So again, let me go to the FHIR website to show you the options. So I'm going to find my observation model in FHIR. I usually do that by just typing in the URL instead of clicking through the links, but whatever you do to find it is fine. So let's look at observation value. So it loads it in here. So value, as you can see here, it has an X attached to it, and that indicates on this top level that you have to make a choice of what kind of actual result you want to fill in. And these are the choices that you have. You can use quantity, codable concept, string, etc., etc., etc. Observations can be all kinds of things that you want to observe about a patient or about a group. So that's why they left you this choice. But for the SDK, this means that the SDK will not know what you want to fill in. So in order to fill in the value, we need to actually first choose that value, create that value as an object, and then put that into our value field. So going back to my code, I will not fill this in yet, but let's first create a new quantity, because in this case, usually these kind of observations are about a quantity. So I'm going to create a new quantity. Again, a FHIR resource type, which is a complex type. So you can see that we have the quantity here. Well, and the quantity takes a value, a unit, and then you can fill in a string. Well, I have already filled in here that the unit, the system string is units of measure, and you can see that's the default as well. So we do not actually have to fill that one in. But what we want to fill in is the value, which is something that comes from our CSV, and then also the unit. Well, the unit I've listed as well. So the unit would be this unit here. And of course, if you want, you can fill in the system for your quantity as well. Now, what we need now is to take the value that's actually in my CSV. And you did probably, I don't know if you could read it, but it has to be a decimal in this case for a quantity. So we need to create a decimal out of that. So we can try and parse that. Well, as I said, I'm just going to parse it, not try it. And it will be in my record. So I have my record, and then we were talking in this case about the white blood cell count. So I'll have to find that one, white blood cell count. And that would be the actual value that we put in the quantity. So now we've created the quantity. We've chosen the quantity data type to fill in my value here. And I can actually now fill that one nicely with my quantity. And of course, you can make this shorter again as well by just putting the whole new quantity type there. So this is what we want to do whenever you have such a choice property. Make your choice and then fill in that particular field with the choice you've made. And then the SDK will be happy. Of course, it will not allow you to create any of the others, I think. Well, no, it will, because it's of type data type. But you will have to make sure that you choose one that's actually valid for this particular field. So now we fill in the quantity here, we fill in the code, and we want to also make sure that we link this observation to the particular patient that's part of that. So what we also want to do is then fill in a reference. So that would be in our subject field. That's the subject of the observation. And this one is, oh, sorry, that's not right. So, that one is a resource reference. So again, just hover over it and you will see it expects a resource reference, and a reference what would be consisting of a couple of parts. So we can create a string of that. And what we would have is, in this case, patient, and then we would add that, And then we would add that patient ID to that. And of course, that's in my record as well as the patient ID. In this case, it's easy. It's more complicated if you have tables that are linked in your database and you need to do a join first, etc., in order to get the correct data out. But for this case, it's easy. We can just use that one. So that's a couple of examples of taking data that we have, mapping it to those FHIR fields that we have. And of course, in this case, we also introduced some data into the FHIR resource by adding that codable concept for the code, which is not something that comes from the CSV, but something that you would pre-agree upon with your team, with people that create the requirements for your project, etc. So that's that extra here, that codable concept. Again, please do check the observation resource type in FHIR in order to see whether there are other mandatory fields that you need to fill in order to get an actual valid observation out of this. As mentioned, that code field is a mandatory one. The status field, by the way, is also a mandatory one, but that takes one of those enumerations again as well. So it's really easy to find out what you can fill in for that particular field. And then you have to make a choice what you by default fill in for your data. Now, the last thing that I want to do is make sure that you can find data again inside of a FHIR resource. So what we want to do is make sure that we can display something inside of our program there. So we could do something like take all the patients, because now we have a patient list. And we have that observation. Oh no, I have to still map it, of course. I would have to make sure that I also do get the white blood cell count, which I didn't do yet. So let me just say observation lists, add, and then get the mapper to get that white blood cell count out of my record. Okay. I'm doing well there. Oh, R, sorry. Because that's my record there. So I want to get a list of observations as well. Now, if you want to take a look at what's in something, we could take a look at patients and then say, for example, for each patient, in my patient list, I want to show the patient's name. So we could do a console. Well, again, just simple coding here with a console app, but you could make this far nicer by creating some nice kind of a user interface that can show some things with nice buttons and colors, etc. But I'm all about just coding here, so that's what I'm doing. So we could say, for example, patient's data. Okay, let's add the patient name to this. That's patient, and you can see again, of course, this is FHIR patient. So we could take a look at the name. But do remember, this is a list again, so we would want to get a first out of that. And again, happy coding, so nothing that is going wrong. And then we might want to take the given and then also take the first out of that. As you can see, I haven't put in the link yet, so just a using statement extra there. And now it would want to do that. And of course, we could say something like, the name the first, and then get the family out. So let me check, semicolon. So if I run this now, hopefully it does something and doesn't break, but again, that's always the nice thing with demos, right? It could just go wrong. Hopefully it doesn't. Okay, so this last one was still the initial right line there. But you can see we have a list of patients, and now we know we have March, Bart, Lisa, Maggie, and Homer Simpson in that file without having to look at the CSV. The idea of this last bit is that you have a FHIR resource and dive into parts of that. So that's the other way around, where you already start with FHIR data and then look at certain parts of that data. So officially, I think we are at the end of the time for this particular session. So are there any questions? Anyone that wants to see something still that I can show you? Okay, I don't hear anyone.
I see a Q&A question. Are there any plans to add a fluent way to add elements to a resource? Well, that's a question for me, I suppose. By the way, I haven't introduced myself. My name is Marco Visser, and I'm one of the software engineers on Firely, and I'm working on the SDK team together with Ewald Kramer and Martin Smit. Ewald Kramer is the one who started all this .NET, I think I saw in the video 10 years ago. So yeah, so we are actually every month we are having a new release out of the SDK. We haven't heard any questions about Fluent part of it, but if that's really really confident, or if it's really easy to use, then well, we can probably fit that in if you want. Yeah, so that is the answer to your question.
Okay. So yeah, I didn't see the actual question yet. I just heard one part which triggered me in trying to get something extra on my code there, because you said something about adding elements, and I was right away thinking about adding a field, but that was not the question, Marco, or was it?
No.
Oh, okay, good. Well, I didn't show you to add any extensions, but again, that's something that you would be easily would be able to do. That's the way to add extra data fields to your patient, for example, in order to map any data that you have in your existing files or databases to, well, if there's no field in the patient that can hold that particular bit of information, you could create extensions and you could just add those extensions to your patient. Or to the level where you want to add them. So for example, if there was a patient birthplace inside of the data, that's something that by default is not a field in the patient resource. And we could do something like this, just add an extension to the patient, use the URL, which is called the canonical URL of the extension. So you would have to have some kind of definition of what the extension is. So, well, I'm just going to shorten this, but there is an extension that is something like birthplace. It does have some more parts to that, but something like that could be the official URL, canonical URL for the extension. And then you could add a value. Again, for extensions, you have the choice of data type. So we would have to think about what we can fill in. You can see it here, data type value. So in this case, for the birthplace, that would be an address, but it could also be something like a string. And for FHIR, if you want to use one of the FHIR data types instead of the native .NET types, which we would have for a string, of course, then you will see that it is preceded by FHIR, and then you can use that. So FHIR string is the way to indicate the string in FHIR. And in this case, we need to do that because it expects a FHIR data type in this point in my code. And then I could add something like that. I always forget where the Simpsons live, so I just use my own city there. So, so something like that could be needed if you have extra data. Of course, you would have to take a look at extensions and having definitions for them, having agreements on what kind of extensions you add to your own data, etc. But that can also just be done with the SDK, as you can see, quite easily. Okay, So
there is another question from Sloan. Oh,
hello. Will you go back to the observation reference?
Sorry, what do you want me to go back to?
To the creation of the observation and setting the reference.
On 43.
Yeah.
This one.
So that's always been, I want to ask you all, because you're the experts, that magic string there with patient slash, is there a reason like strong typing can't be incorporated here, or it has to be loose because of the standard? This has always been like a thorn in my side right here. That magic string always bothers me.
Yeah, so it's, go ahead, Mirjam.
No. I wanted to ask you if you have a better way of filling it in, because in my demos I always do it like this, but.
No, but I think the question is why it's so loose and not coupled on.
Yeah.
So we have patient and we have observations, but they are run really like a foreign key kind of way connected to each other.
Yes.
I think that's the question, right? Yeah. So I think that's because the standard has is like this. Maybe Mirjam, you can give some background why this is the case.
Could it be because of the contained element?
Yeah, of the contain element, this could be.
Yeah, it can be all kinds of things, right? So in this case, what I'm saying is I have a patient technical ID, so I fill it in like this. But I could also not have that because it's something that is new and I want to send that as a transaction to my FHIR server and let the FHIR server decide the actual technical IDs. And then in that case, what it could look like is instead of what I just done is something like this, adding not a real technical ID, but this construction or new UID. And then some kind of magic number there, which is unique within my set of information that I now send out to the server. So it doesn't have to be like this. It doesn't have to indicate the FHIR resource type. It could also be something like this. Or you could have an absolute URL, but then you also would incorporate the resource type in there. Actually, inside of the reference, it's just a string. So that's something that's, at least for the SDK, is opaque what could be in there.
Like, I kind of understand why you need the general one as a backup plan. Like, when we're doing these foreign key references, I'm always wondering, like, we know observation most likely is going to reference a patient, right? So could there be a helper method that's like my resource set patient foreign key reference, and just give the patient FHIR logical ID instead of magically making the patient / magic string.
In some cases, we also have this kind of we also have kind of references that's also, for example, references a group or a patient. So not only one resource is. So that's going to be a bit. There is no general way. So
gotcha. Okay.
That make it a bit difficult to put it in the SDK.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's also important to note that you might not have those resources when you're executing your code. If if you log in via Smart App Launch or something, you'll have your patient ID, but you won't necessarily have your patient record unless you're going and pulling it and doing all those things manually. So being able to link to just the ID means you can create observations, do all those different things without
having to take care of the foreign key. Yeah.
Would it be worth like having a constructor though that takes in like the resource type and an ID just as another optional type of constructor for references, the reference data type?
I would very much like that, and that's why I have opened up this GitHub repo for you to see. This is the actual, it's open source, the Firely Net SDK, so you can see it on GitHub, you can find it. It's not just the NuGet package that we have added to our project. And of course, since this is a GitHub repo, you can also add issues to that. So any feature requests or any comments, or of course bugs as well, you can just make sure that you add them to this issue list on the Firely Net SDK GitHub repo. And then, well, if there are a lot of people that say, oh yeah, we really need that, then Marco and the team will maybe decide that it needs to be added, or not, but there at least will be a discussion that started. So that could be really useful as well. So it's just on the Firely team, and then Firely-Net SDK, that would be the GitHub repo. And you will see that there's other branches here as well. Well, I don't know, but for me, by default, it's the default branch, the develop STU3. Yeah. I would probably want to use another one, but that doesn't matter for the issues, of course. So yeah, that's
also,
useful.
can we only raise issues, or can we be, you know, grain of salt, be contributors where you would look over our pull request?
Yeah, I will stop my share and then let Marco talk.
Yeah, sorry. Okay. This is an open source community, so you're very welcome to file a pull request, and then we'll have a look at it, and then there is I think a section in the README how to do that. Okay. And yeah, we love to hear from you guys if you want to have new features. I think we are really quite feature complete, but it'll also we need some improvements there. And yeah, we'd love to have your feedback to that. So just file in an issue or an announcement. And we have also this didn't show you that, but on the same GitHub there is also a discussion where we can have a discussion about new features if you want. So it's a bit more low-key than creating an issue, probably. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I think there was also a question from Mark. I saw a raising hand somewhere. Mark Uboma, if I pronounced it correctly. Yeah, I see it. Maybe can you open your mic?
Hi, yes. So thank you for the presentation. I just have a quick question, which is, I'm new to FHIR and wondering what the use case is for this exercise specifically. You know, I noticed you're doing mapping from a data file to the specification. Just wondering, when will you need to do this? Is it preparing, you know, creating an interface for exchanging data or what?
Yeah. So I do training courses, also workshops. We have a Firely server, which is a full FHIR server at Firely. And we have customers for that, of course. So what we do find quite often at those customer sites is that they have existing data. And usually it's not in a CSV, of course, but in large databases, a data warehouse that they have. And those data warehouses, they of course were created in a time that we didn't have FHIR yet. So you could see all kinds of things we had. We could have observation data in one table. That would be nice. Some patient data in a separate table, that would be nice. But we also have encountered customers where all of that is in one large table or in a whole set of different tables. And in all of those cases, what you have is that you have data fields, points in your data that you want to get into a FHIR resource, because what people need a FHIR server for or need a FHIR solution for is because they have the requirement to open up their data with FHIR. That's usually the start. You need to somehow get that old data out of your systems, or old data, but all of the data you have out of the systems, open it up in a FHIR way. So if that's your requirement, you right away have this mapping problem or challenge where you have existing data that isn't nicely put into all of the fields that we know from FHIR, but in your own fields. And sometimes there's less data than you might want, or sometimes there's quite a lot of data, or it's distributed across tables or across fields in a table, and you need to somehow get that nicely into a FHIR resource in order to then open up your data with FHIR. So that's one of the main use cases that we quite often encounter in our implementation consultancy parts of the job. And even if you do not use a Firely server, but a different FHIR server, you have the same thing. You have existing data, and now that existing data needs to somehow be transformed to fire data. And in all of those cases, you need to do some kind of mapping. And this exercise was meant to show you that it's possible to do something like that with the Firely Net SDK that already knows the fire model and can then help you out with certain things in order to fill that data in correctly, or hopefully in a nice way, not too hard of a way. So I hope that answers your question, Mark.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So the next part, the next session will be about communicating fire resources. But of course, that already needs you to have data in Fire, or if you're on the other side that you need to request fire data from a fire system, then you might need to do reverse mapping as well. So you might be able to retrieve data from some system or get incoming data, but then you might need to map that to the actual structure that you have in your existing systems. So now we've mapped this way around from that custom data format to Fire, but of course the mapping could also be the other way around. Yeah, so yeah. Nice.
I had a question to carry off of what you were talking about there. What if the system you have also, or you're trying to map to Fire, has essentially been mapped for HL7-251? So each of the different observations, the test results, have a LOINC value. And if they have a pick list, they have SNOMED codes. Do you have to still map like you've shown here, or can you say this is the value from the table of the database to pull into Fire?
If you know for sure that it's a LOINC code in that particular field in your database table, the only thing that you might need to do is add that system URL to it, because Fire tries to be most human readable. So for all of those code systems, there's usually the bigger ones is there is a system URL, and we would like you or encourage you to use those. But yes, you could just take the value from your field. Then, if you know it's a LOINC value or if you know it's a SNOMED value, we do recommend to add that system URL though, because other systems might not be able to recognize the value as being a LOINC value, even if you know that in your system.
Yeah, we've wrapped, just to explain, we've wrapped our coding objects with different types of code. So we have all of that stuff already preset, so you can create a wrapper around a LOINC code or ICD-10 code that has all of those stuff preset.
Yeah.
And you just put the value in it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's quite possible indeed. Yeah. But I do also see a lot of systems that do not have codes, but perhaps descriptions, etc. And then there's a whole other layer of mapping, because then you would need to check what you have and perhaps try to map that to a LOINC code like I did. This data was, of course, very simple and clear. So I could easily take a LOINC value there. But sometimes it's not so clear. By the way, then you would have to have an option to, instead of using a code and a system, to add the text that you might have in your database field as the display value of your code. And that's perfectly valid according to Fire as well, although, of course, for lookup things, it's less usable. You want to be able to search on a LOINC code or search on a SNOMED code or something like that. And if all you have is all kinds of strings, then that's less easy to do research or statistics on. But it's certainly valid. So if that's what you have and you do not know what's in there, or the data is too diverse, then instead of mapping to those codes and using systems and values for those, you can take the actual thing you have and put that in a string in the display value. Less recommended though, but that could be a fallback option for you.
I see here another question from Michael. Is the HL7 file library should be compatible with any compliant Fire server? Well, it's a standard.
It's a standard, yeah. So yes, I would say yes. With any server that's actually Fire server, yes. We do encounter sometimes people that run into problems with code, and actually the problem is not with their code, but with the server not accepting it or sending out invalid Fire data. That happens. But the main Fire servers, of course, that we have out here, like Smile CDR, which is the commercial equivalent of Happy Server, the Firely server, and some other big ones. Oh, Gino, I'm sorry, the Microsoft server as well, of course.
He's on the call.
I shouldn't forget. Fortunately,
which I don't actually work on, so it's fine.
That's also true. That's also true.
Yeah, but yes, all of those Fire servers, yeah, they would accept data that comes from the Firely SDK, and you can implement your own Fire server if you want. It's quite a lot of work, we know that, but you could implement your server with the Firely SDK as well, which is what we have done for the Firely server. And I think the Microsoft server has also used the Firely Net SDK for its internal workings.
You have some permissive parsing flags too, right? I think.
Yeah.
On the client side.
Yeah, so we didn't talk about validation, etc. yet, but that's something that Marco will do in the next session. So let me check. I think in about 10 minutes, right, Marco? We will start with your session there.
Yeah, we have to put on the 5 minutes slides.
Oh, by the way, for anyone who's interested, I have pushed the fleshed out version of my solution to the GitHub repo that was in the Q&A. So you can download that one as well and see what I've done with the mapping of these other things and some display things. I also display some observation data in there. So you could just run that as an example solution on the things that we've just done and perhaps, well, get some ideas for your own projects. I always like copy pasting stuff, so it's always good to have a couple of examples.
Just to, when you clone the repo, just go to the branch session 1, because that's where the Mirjam put her stuff in. I saw some questions coming through in the Q&A about that.
Okay, yeah, it's session 1 for my part there.
All right. Do we have more questions in the Q&A?
I actually like this. This informal half an hour of time to have all kinds of these small discussions and a couple of well, really interesting and good questions there. So yeah, it feels like we have way more time than we did the other time, Marco. For me at least, because we now have this little bit of a buffer time to do this. So hopefully all of you who stay online with us enjoy this too. Yeah, so please do let us know if you have any more questions. In about, well, a little less than 10 minutes, we will continue with the next part where Marco will show some things. But yes, please do keep adding questions or unmuting if you have anything.
I unmuted.
Yes, Sloan.
When we do Fire client uploads, does the library have built-in like OAuth stuff, or do we have to roll our own?
Yeah,
it does.
I'm not sure I'm going to get to that point. I have some, and I see Gino already laughing, but there's a long session that you can talk about that. I know that Gino had a great video about that on YouTube. Maybe you can post that, Gino, in the chat. I have also some things prepared for that, but I think I'm not going to make that in the next session. But there are a lot of great resources that you can find on the internet how to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the biggest trick is getting the redirect back if you're not building a web app. So that makes it challenging to do in short demos.
Yeah. I should do something with Postman and stuff like that to get the token back. So I'm not sure I'm going to make that in that time.
No.
I'll try. What I can do in the next session, Sloan, is just to give you some sample code, how you do that with the Fire client, because you need some extra things for that.
A breadcrumb would be appreciated. Thank you very much.
Yeah, okay. And remember, if I don't do it, just say so.
Sloan knows my has my email address, I think.
Oh dear.
So he knows
Oh
where
dear.
to find me. We've met before, so it's good to see you again, Sloan. By the way, or see
At the
you.
conferences, always find you, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's absolutely no problem. So for any of you out there, if you can ping me on the Tulip platform as well, I'm on there. So just if you want to ask anything afterwards, of course, during DevDays, just send me a message on Hoova and I will be able to answer that. We will also keep monitoring the Q&A from time to time to see if anything new comes in. So yeah, please. Please make use of that because we're here now. And yeah, but if you find my details anywhere else and it's FHIR related, just drop a line and I will be happy to help you out and point you to some things if needed. So I'm going to start my countdown slide. So I will shut up for a bit and I will share my screen. So we have 5 minutes of relative downtime here, and then we will continue again. So that's just to let anyone in who didn't join us for the first session. So I will make sure that gets started up.
Yeah, see you after the break then for 5 minutes. Hi there. Welcome back from the first session, or welcome to when you're not for the first session, welcome here at the second session of Let's Build with .NET and the SDK. The previous session was held by Mirjam. She's still on the call, and she's there and can help us out with questions. My name is Marco Visser. I'm a software engineer for Firely, and I'm working on the SDK together with Ewout Kramer and also Martin Smith. We're both on the Firely SDK team, and every month we're getting out new packages, new releases from the SDK. I'm also was working for the Firely server, our also a product from Firely, which is a FHIR server. But the SDK is a lot of work, so just shift only to that team. Well, what are we going to do today in this session? The last session was about mapping resources from, for example, a CSV file to POCOs, to FHIR objects. We're now going to validate those resources, and just to find out if all these FHIR resources are still conforming to what the FHIR standard is saying about them. So if you want to have questions during the session, just open your mic and yell at me, not too loud, but I also have in between a bit that we can ask questions there. Otherwise, at the end of this session. Otherwise, you can have your microphone muted. I think that's the best thing. All right, I will share my screen. That would be a nice start to show you my desktop, and start completely without any project at all. I will have that out of the way. Wait. So, and we create a new project. And we are going to create a console application here. So we have it here. Let's call it DevDays. DevDays. Oh, my caps is hanging here. Yeah, it is. DevDays 2021. It's also June. And go ahead. Create it. .NET 5.0. It's fine format by me. And we'll end up with a new project, hopefully today. It's not responding. Well, it's always nice to have this start, but there it is. Yeah, I think it's large enough, right? Yeah, okay, great. Good, we have a hello world. We are doing more than hello world today. We're going to validate the resources, but first we have to create a resource here. So let's make this public and create a simple patient resource. But before to do that, we have to import the package, the SDK package. And we have that several packages already. We are doing here the R4 solution. Let's put it on NuGet, otherwise we don't find anything. It started with HL7.FHIR. If you search on that, you will see a lot of things. And we are working today with FHIR R4. So let's include that in our project. And yes, it's okay. And there it is. So that gives us all the types that we need to create, for example, a patient. Let's do that here. Okay, a static patient. It's not happy yet, but if I press Ctrl period, then I can fill in the using, and there it is. And give that patient some basic properties. For example, give it a name. And like Mirjam told us in the previous version of a previous session, that it's actually a list of names, of human names. And so I create here a list, and in that list goes one human name. And let's have that family. It's all code intelligence helps me a lot here. And give it my last name, family name. All right, that is one property. I don't like this, so I just put this here and just put it in using if he wants me to. Well, see further on. Yeah, now it's complaining. I thought, when are you going to yell at me? But now you do. Okay, the next one would I be, well, there is an active property. We put it to true. We set it to true. And what else? A birthday. Well, it's a live recording, but who cares? Everybody can know my birthday. Send me a message when it's my birthday. All right, so there we have our patient. We can work with that. And now, when we have this patient, we would like to, well, maybe we can do first one thing, just print it to our screen. That would be very nice. And we create a few extension methods for that, and you can use that. So if you have this patient that we already created, you can use the toJSON string, to JSON, and that will give you a string back in JSON format. We'll have to get we have to add the using HL7 Fire serialization to that, otherwise it doesn't recognize the extension. Now it does, and now this gives back, you can see, a string, and then we can write that in our on our console. So let's do that. Just for sake, I put it here, so that's going to be quicker. And well, we can have a run. So I press F5 just to have a look, and that goes quick. I know now because it shows at the console. It shows the right line and then close the console quite after that. So that was not really a good demo because I need to stop it so that you can also see what is the output. Let's put a read key in there. So we have to pause there. So let's do it again. Press F5, and now we'll see the string in JSON format. So that is the bit of serialization here. So we serialized this POCO, this resource. We serialized now to a JSON. There is also an equivalent for that. There is also a 2XML if you want. Oh, not like that, but there you have it. 2XML, you have that format as well. But I rather stick to JSON at the moment. And what we also can do is, because this JSON was printed to one line, we can also give the toJSON method a few settings so that it's pretty printed, and we need to have these settings there, and we put pretty to true just to make things pretty. And then you see that the JSON line is just distributed in a few lines on the console. That reads a bit easier, I think. There you have it. So with settings, you can do a bit of tuning how your JSON is going to look like. All right, so we have a patient, and we want to see if it meets the FHIR rules. We need a validator for that, and the validator lives in another package, namely the FHIR HL7 FHIR specification, which I haven't had that at the moment. So happily, I still have my package solution still open, NuGet, and that is the specification. Or did I already install that? No. There. And go back to the program and create a new validator. So, and that is very simple because it's called, like you probably would think, new validator. And it doesn't know that, intelligent doesn't know that because I didn't use that yet in the using statement, but there it is. And now it knows. What you can see in the validator, if you put in the validator. Sorry, go back a bit. The validator has a function validate, and in that validate you can put in an instance. In this case, in our case, would that be patient, right? What you also can see is that the validate has is actually a function and gives back an operation outcome. An operation outcome is also a FHIR resource, which we also can serialize again. So let's put that in. Let's put it to the outcome. There you have it. And let's write that to the console. I'm a bit of a lazy person at the moment, because normally I would make very nice functions to that, but do it like this. So we have the outcome, we put it to the JSON, we make it pretty and write it to the console. So let's see what happens. It would be very easy, right? Just have 2-3 lines of code. First, we'll see the resource patient, and then we have the output, and it's an error. Oh dear. What it's saying that the SDK cannot validate the patient, and because it needs actually the definition of the patient, the structure of the profile of the patient, and it doesn't have that at the moment. Luckily, the SDK have that all already packaged for you, and that's called resource resolving. So we have a few resource resolvers that helps you out to find the definitions of the profiles of the resources. One very interesting one is the zip source, and that's where all the profile, the validation profiles lives. So that's called. So we put this zip source on. It's a new class. Doesn't know that yet, so we have to get using to it. So here we have the using, so it knows that, yeah. And this is the creation validation source. So this is a resource resolver, which if you give it to the validator, he knows where to find where the definitions are, where the profiles are, and can use those profiles to validate our patients. So we put this in a variable resolver. And we have to put this resolver in anyway in this validator. And you do that with settings, with validate settings. So we have validation settings. Here we have it. We create the default settings. For now, will be fine. So we put that in variable settings. And then we put in the settings the resolver. There you go. What this does, oh, I forgot about this. The settings should also give and given to the validator like this. And now we can try it again. So we compile it, we press F5. It will pops up the console again, gives us the patient first, and then try to validate the patient. And you will see we have an operation outcome without any errors. So that's a good thing. So there aren't any issues on the operation outcome. And this means that our patient is valid. Maybe you also notice that it took a while between these lines to be printed and this one, because it has to read in all the profiles. That takes a while. So every time the validator is doing this, it will find and create all those things again. We can do that a bit more friendlier by putting into a cached resolver. So all the profiles that you already find, that will be cached. So let's do that. We put the cached resolver in, and then it's taking the source as the source and putting the cached resolver around it. Oh, I think where is this screen, because I'm still running. And if we run it again, it would be, then the second time would be much quicker. Okay, well, this was a very interesting patient, only with a family name and a birthday and active true, but maybe we can try to disrupt this patient a bit, so it just is not a valid patient anymore. Well, like Mirjam said in the previous session, patient is really easy because it doesn't have really mandatory fields. has it not at all, actually. If you go to the page where you can find that here on the FHIR, on the HL7org/FHIR and then patient, you see the resource with all these properties, and you will see all there are not really mandatory. But if we are adding communication, for example, you see that the language is here mandatory. So what would we do if we add a communication item and just don't fill in the language, just to only have the preferred one, and let's see what happens. That should give us an invalid resource. But let's try that again. So we have probably the communication here, like the property. This is the same that we have here. It's a list. So list of components, communication components. And let's have one item in that and put, what was it, preferred, and put that to true. Don't do anything with the language, because that should be mandatory, but we want to trigger an incorrect POCO. Right, I think I have everything here correctly, so I just run it again. There you go. There's the resource coming up with the communication and preferred true. And in the meantime, it's going to validate as well. And ta-da! Happy coding, still sweaty hands, but still it works. We have an instance count of null, because we didn't have any language filled in, but the cardinality, like the profile said, should be 1-to-1. That means mandatory. All right, so that works. Maybe for clarity, we put it on the next screen and just give it a language so it doesn't yell at this next time. I know that language is a codable concept, so we can put codable concept, has some as a standard constructor for that. I'm a bit lazy, put it in some dummy things, and this should be, next time if you run it, it will be clear again and it will be valid. Okay, so what we did, we just created the POCO, created the resource, patient resource, and just validated that with our standard validation source. Well, like I said, I talked about profiles a lot, and we also have other profiles in the world, many of them. And I think, Mirjam, I think you are giving next tomorrow a session about profiles, or somebody else is doing that. But there you can learn a lot more about profiles in the world. But we are here in the US, so I know we have a US core patient as well, and that's a profile that's built on the FHIR patient. And let's have a look. I have this page open. It's on the FHIR US core, and this is the DSU3, but there's also an R4 for that. And you will see that this is a bit different. It's based on the patient, on the standard patient of FHIR, but has some mandatory fields. For example, an identifier is mandatory and a human name is mandatory. Well, we already filled that in. And what else? Gender is also mandatory. I think we didn't have the gender already. So let's try if we can find out if we can use this profile. Therefore, we have to download the structure definition / profile of this US core, and there is a download page, and that's somewhere here. And you see that there is here. You can see all the profiles that you can use, but I know that profiles are using profiles again, so it's better to have them all, and then it's better to have this package. So the package actually contains all the resources and profiles to US core. Well, not to it's not that big, but I thought it was not be wise to do that for waiting for it. So I already downloaded that. That's here, and we go to the. I will. Where is that? Here it is. I will have it here. Where is it? I thought it was DevDays here. There it is. I create here a new folder. Let's call it profiles. paste that package there, and I will extract it here as well. So let's extract it to here. I know there's the tarball in it, and also extract that also to here. And there you have all the profiles with search parameters. It's quite a lot. I'm only interested actually in this one, the structure definition, US core patient, but there is a lots more of that. Okay, now we go back to our solution again. Now we have to tell our validator to use those profiles. And well, for the standard, we already have this one, but now we have a directory containing all those profiles. So we have also in the SDK another class for that, and that's called the directory source. Yeah, just had to look for that. Yeah, there is it. So there's we have a directory resolver. Oops. And it's called directory source. There you have it. And we put that to profiles there. What we also do is just include subdirectories. So there is a directory source settings for that. Do it like this and include subdirectories true, because I already saw that it was not in the main directory of profiles, but already a bit down. So there we have it. Directory source settings include subdirectories true. So it will go to in this profiles directory and go through all the properties. All right. What also I have to do is to, when I run it, then it's also copied to the output. So what I will do is just copy. Wait, copy always. Well, that's going to be very copy newer. So maybe it's better to put it like this. Copy to the output at the moment. So, all right, going back to the program, we have the directory solver already, but we have to combine that with the standard profiles because they are also dependent on each other. So we already have the standards here, we have the directory source here, but we have to combine that. And there we have another class for that, and it's called the multi-resolver, which takes both of resolvers and just make it a composition. So like we have a new variable, multi, and we take this multi-resolver. Oops, there it is. And that has a few arguments, namely the standard one, and we can take the directory resolver to that. And maybe let's cast that already also. Oh, new cast resolver, so that we don't have to go into that the whole time if we want to validate something. So this multi resolver that's containing now the directory source and also the standard source, we give that to our settings, which is here. We already had to put a cast around it, so we can put multi here. And now it's now it also knows all the US code profiles. But you have to say to the validator that he has to take that US profile as the profile to validate. So there is a second, no, not here, but on the validate one, there is a second parameter that give us a way to give all the profile canonical URLs. So that should be a string, and I don't know by heart which one it is. So I go back to our US code profile, go back to the patient, and there is here the official profile URL. Copy that, go back to our program and fill it in here. So that was a bit more work, but hopefully we have now included those things. So let's try what's happening now. save it first and just hit F5 or hit the DevDays June. And there we go again. So that is the first patient. And now it's going to see. And I thought about that because I was thinking that I did something wrong here because it doesn't find the US core profiles.
Did you copy the folder to your output directory?
That was supposed to be here.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I missed that one.
That's that, not that. So I'll go back to my here. Then just have a look if it's only that, not all of them. Did something wrong there. Just I want to have them all.
Is it double star or something like that?
Yeah, could be, or just 1 star. Oh. What, you know what? In my demo, I did something else. In my preparation, I didn't have this. Let's put all of this 1 up. So now it's like I had it first. Go back to my running thing, to my program. And now it should have the output there. Go to bin, debug. Yeah, that looks better. And now I'm getting hopefully an outcome resource outcome with, yeah, that looks better, although it looks not better because it's not valid, but that's true because the US core said many things, because the identifier is mandatory and the gender is mandatory and what else was mandatory? The name is mandatory, but we already filled in the name. So it's not whining about that one, but only about the identifier and about the gender. So phew, that works. So it's now running our patient to the US core profile. Maybe we can correct the patient so it's also fine for the US core file. I think it was the identifier. I know it's a list, and identifier, where are you? Give it a string, system. Oops, system with M, and a code and a value. So not worrying about that. That's one. And the other one was gender. That's a bit easier because that is already filled in for us now. Let's put it on unknown. All right. So we made now the patient resource. We filled on the mandatory element, so hopefully it's not yelling at us now. And you see the POCO is still getting bigger and bigger. And there you have it. There are no issues, so we have no errors. So this patient is now also US core patient conformant. What I did here in the validator is just give this a canonical URL to the validator. What you also can do is put it in the resource itself. Mostly is that done as well. So what you can do, that's called meta. If you go to the US core patient, you won't see it here, but you will see it in domain resource. It's a hierarchy, and also not there, but in the resource one. And there you will see meta. And in meta, you can give some. It's a data type, and there you can give some profiles like this. So I can do that now. So make a new meta. Not meta, but meta. And profile. Also, I think it was a string here. copy paste that one. Oops, and there you have the patient, comma behind it. Is it happy? It's not happy. Getting something probably. Profile is of type enumerable string. Oh wait, there you have it. So I put it now in the patient itself, so it's not needed to put it here anymore because the resource contains the profile itself. So, and if we run it now, it will look into the meta part and just use that profile. Have a look at that. We'll run that now. So that was the first part, the validation part. Maybe we can have just a minute for questions if there are any, because the second session will, the second part will get talk about communication with the FHIR server.
Well, I have only just one question on this session, which was about HL7v3 and whether FHIR, the SDK, could perhaps also serialize to HL7v3 at some point in time. I already answered that one because, of course, the Fire SDK focuses on FHIR, and even though you can use it in situations where you want to map things, it does not serialize to HL7v3 itself, so you will have to do some extra work around that. And I do see a raised hand now. Diraj, could you unmute, please?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Maria. So my question is, this one is where we are creating a resources here using the .NET application itself. What if we have a server where we are getting the resources from the server and we would like to validate it? So is there a deserializing functionality too?
Well, actually, in the next part, we are going to communicate with the FHIR server. And I can, because I still have the code here, I can also show you how to validate that incoming resources, for example.
Yep, that will be helpful. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, great.
Okay, and I see another raised hand there. Rohit Gupta.
Yeah, so my question is like, for now we have used this US core patient for structure definition. So is it possible to use custom definition? Like some of them we want as a mandatory field and some of them we don't want as a mandatory field. So yeah, something like a custom structure.
Yeah, that's called profiling. So that's a whole other world. But yeah, you can create your own profile. You have to know, let the validator know where that profile is, like I did now with this US core patient. But you can create your own structure definition and add some new mandatory fields if you want.
And in addition to that, you could set the meta.profile field to the specific profile that resource needs to conform to. And then if you have multiple profiles, the validator will make sure it just, well, as Marco did in his code, it will check against that meta profile field. So you could have other patient profiles in the same folder as well, Dutch patient profile, and then you could ask the validator to validate it against that one instead. So.
And how the memory consumption for that? Like suppose for custom fields we gave only 2 or 3 fields, but patient or observation resource having some 20 fields, but we just want to validate 3 or 4 fields. So will it save memory also? Profiling?
Well, what you're also, yeah, if you don't have to retrieve all the fields from the FHIR server. You can also have a summary, for example, and that will not fill in all the properties of your resource at the client side, and then you can reduce your memory consumption with that.
Okay, yeah.
Marco, we have 10 minutes left.
Yeah, we have 10 minutes. Oh, God. Okay, so I will continue then. I think this Q&A on WUFA is open also after this
and we will monitor that. You can reach out to us afterwards as well.
So if your question is not asked here, you ask it later and then we come back to that. All right, the next part is going to be about FHIR clients, because that is the resource that we are going to communicate with the FHIR server. You know what, I'll leave this bit of code here because I just put some bright lines back. Well, you know, just because maybe we can take it later as well. I just commented out. Maybe we can use it later, although we have only 10 minutes. No pressure. And again, we need the FHIR client. And for this demo, I just reach out to our Firely server. It's a FHIR complete FHIR server, and we have a public endpoint on the web. So just copy paste that from my left-hand screen. And here and with this statement, we can create the FHIR client, and the client is with this client we can communicate with the FHIR client, the FHIR server. This is the URL server.fhir.ly. It's always online. We have an R3 and an R4 endpoint ready. So if you want to play with that, just go ahead. You can use that there. What a nice feature before we start, it's maybe just a good thing to know what kind of capabilities has this FHIR server. You can do that with a capability statement. You can ask the capability statement of the FHIR server, and then we can have an idea what it can do, and put that in a variable. Here you go. And this is also a FHIR resource, so we can also put that to our console. Can do that here. Copy paste is your friend in this time, not always, but here it is. And let's have a look what this does. What I created now, a FHIR client connected to a FHIR server, and ask the capability statement of the FHIR server, and that will give us back what all the resources that it will support and whatsoever. Just run this. Always funny live coding. Hopefully it's a server online, you never know. Well, it's a lot. Yeah, that's a very lot. Well, you got it. Well, it gives you all back the search parameter will define which resource it will have. I can go scroll up, but I don't know it's everything. Oh, well, it is. But no, not everything. It's already cut off. Doesn't matter. But it gives you a kind of a thing what is an idea what it's doing, what it's capable of. That's the right word to say. Anyway, the resource that we already created here. So thank God I didn't put everything out, but the resource that we created is sorry, this one not needed. We want to this resource I'm talking about. We want to have that on the FHIR server, and we use the method, the function create for that. So we saw the capability statement, so we can just delete that and use this client to create the patient, the memory patient that we have here. There you go. And it will create the patient there. Creating a patient is, I know, it gives back the patient that he created. And if something goes wrong, it will throw an exception. So it's good to know that it's good to,
Can you not use var there and show, because I want to know if the method outcome is a part of that object or it's just a patient. So it throws an exception.
Like this, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
if the method outcome is unsuccessful, it throws an exception. That's
yeah, that's completely right. If the server is not there or it's invalid or something, it will throw an exception. If it doesn't throw an exception, it's valid and it's created there, and then it will give you a patient resource. It will also populate the ID of the patient, because we didn't put here an ID in this in-memory resource, but it will give you back here an ID. We see that in a moment. Just for sake, we put an X. If something wrong, we can just log it as well. So, and maybe we can have the ID, this printed ID of the patient that we got back. So, like you said, you are ID of patient. All right, let's do that. Yeah, I know. Sorry about that. Run it again. And hopefully there it is. So we have now the ID of the patient. So we didn't have any exception here. And on the server, if we search for this ID, we'll get back our just created patient. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe we can do that now, because there we have also another another function for that, and that's called read. It's create, read, delete. We also have these. You see that we have a lot of methods on these kind of on this client. What we want to do is to read the patient, and then you have to fill in like Mirjam also had this patient URL, and that's going to be, maybe we can put that better like this, and put here patient ID. So that will give us the patient back. This, by the way, can also be written in another way. That's a resource identity, and you can build that resource identity. You don't have to, and you can fill in here the ID. That will do the trick as well. So, but we do now only this, and that gives you again a patient back. Oh, maybe I heard people like this, so we do this. Let's run that. I don't put in anything on the console, but if we have no exception, we know that's been written, read on a correct way. And there you go. Yeah, I have 2 minutes left, I think. There are several other ways to find things, like client. We have a client search, for example. Oops. Use the generics again here, and then you can have a lot of criteria as well. For example, we can have this as a search string. So in this case, we are searching on our FHIR server to all the patients that have exact family last name Visser. That is what it's doing here. Another thing that we can do in that now copy pasting thing, because I can't type that all in a few minutes, but this is also another way to find things. That we have a helper class, like of a builder class, to populate your search parameters. We're searching here again to the family name Visser, order it by birth date. We only want to have the summary elements, and we include a patient organization if there is one, and limit the result to 5. You can give this to the search, and that will give you also your search result back. And if you want to continue, because you are now limited to 5 patients, will probably be more. If you want to continue, you can also use this. That goes to all the next pages. Should give here a fart for the compiler. It's gone. So and here's the 5, and you want to go to continue. For example, in your client program, you have pages. You go to the next. You are using this continue method for that.
So
anyway,
limit to equal to underscore count.
Sorry, I heard something about count, but
limit to is equal to underscore count.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the nice thing here is that the SDK creates the correct URL to send out to the FHIR server for you without you having to know all of the details of that. So, okay, well, we're at time, Marco, but perhaps we can still stick around for a little bit longer, but you probably will want to check what the next session is that you would want to attend. I did put in the Q&A again a link to the session 2 repo branch where Marco has uploaded the complete solution that we created for this particular presentation here. So hopefully you found it useful. We will still stick around a little bit longer to see if there are any more questions. There was one question about the operation outcome that was empty just now. So would that be expected? Well, it would not be expected to be empty when you send it out to a client that requests this. But of course, in your code, you could check for success, right, Marco?
Yeah, you can.
Instead of just outputting it. So.
Yeah. There is on the outcome is there is a success. So my code diligence doesn't help me now, but it's it is a Boolean. It gives you a success or not. Yeah.
So you could check for that one first before you send out any message or add a message if it's successful. So for all of you who attended this session and perhaps also my session previous to this one, thank you so much for your attention. So yeah, I can understand that you want to go now and see what the next sessions are, but if there's anyone left that still has a question, please do feel free to unmute and we will discuss that still.
Okay.
So Sloan, I did see you unmute there.
Yeah. Will you unvar the search results?
Here? It's a bundle.
Yes. It's a bundle. Okay.
Yeah.
And will the results be null after the continue doesn't find any more next?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Oh, what I didn't mention is that there is we have some documentation on the client. We wrote that. Just trying to here. It's also on the README, but here you can find some operation that you can use that we documented it. We put it in the chat. It's better than put it in my program, but I will put it in the chat. Sorry about that. Yeah.
What I was going to add for the attendees is very, very underestimated not having to stitch together the string magic for the REST calls that's encapsulated in this library. You could never, it would take you 6 months of dedicated effort to come up with something half as nice. So don't underestimate that. Is anybody else here besides me? Maybe I'm the only one. You guys already know that. Right,
good to see so many people here.
Yeah, hi, Brian.
Hi, Brian.
Brian also is a contributor to the SDK.
And I've just lost voice again.
You're running behind somehow with your, for me at least.
For me as well. No.
But it's good to see you, Brian. Yeah, he's a really valued member of the FHIR community and can help out with lots of SDK questions as well. We do our best, but Brian is absolutely also a valuable source of knowledge there. So, yeah. So, well, anyone else who still has a question? Otherwise, I will end the call. I see Rohit raising hand. So please go ahead, Rohit, with that.
Yeah, so my question is related to, let's suppose we want to update something in FHIR. So we have a bundle of bundle, means that there are the observation or patient, means combination of two bundle we want to create. Means, and in Fire client, is there any method to update such kind of bundles in a single call or single method? Like Fire client.create will create a patient resource. So I want to create a patient plus observation, both the things together. So is there any possibility?
Yeah, you could create a transaction bundle and then send that as transaction to the server. And within the transaction bundle, per resource that you put in, you say, okay, this resource needs to be created or this resource needs to be updated on the server, depending on whether it already exists or not. So all of the things that you could do as a standalone interaction with your Fire server, you could mimic that in a transaction bundle and then send that transaction bundle as a transaction in one go to the Fire server.
So how the error presentation will be? Suppose one bundle having validation error and another bundle is successfully validated. So how it will be updated in server? Like it is depends on transition async, or in single shot all the bundle will be failed. So how it will be?
Well, for a transaction, the idea is that all of the separate interactions inside need to succeed on the server side, or you get an error message sent back. So that's something that the server needs to check if everything is okay with your transaction, with all of the parts of your transaction, and send back an error message if something is wrong. And that would mean for transactions that everything is rolled back server side and nothing has changed. Of course, that's something that your Fire server then also needs to support, because it's quite a lot of work to make sure that that mechanism works correctly. But if you have a Fire server that supports that, then that should work. You should get an error on the bundle that has errors in it, and you should get a success if everything was okay.
Yeah, you
the
also go ahead.
Yeah, the result of that transaction or batch is a bundle itself, and each of the entries in that bundle is the result of the corresponding request. So if you had submitted the batch or a transaction as a create a patient, create an observation, you'll get a bundle as a result back that's saying the patient was successful, it created patient 42, the observation was successful, it created observation 043. And so if there was an error on the observation, you'd get patient was created, observation wasn't, and this is the error message you got. That's the difference between batch and transaction. Transaction will roll it back and you'll get those errors, whereas batch will allow partial success. But you've got the results either way. Cool.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah.
That was a useful
I was going
addition.
to say, if you're a .NET developer and you ever did loose data sets back in the day, a bundle is kind of like a loose data set, and it's got different things in it. And you kind of got to look at, the contents when you're looking at it raw. That's what the SDK gives you. It's strong typing everything in that bundle for you.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Anyone else who still has some question? Oh, Rohit, you unmuted again. Yes, please do go ahead.
No, thank you. That's fine. I think I got answers.
Oh, okay.
Okay, good. Okay, well, last call then for any other question that might be remaining here.
And otherwise, we are on the Q&A.
Yes,
of our session.
so please do find us during DevDays. We will be around. We can always schedule something if you have a question or want us to show something more. So reach out to us, send us a message, and we will be happy to get in touch with you. So thank you all so much for your attention, and hope you have a really great rest of your DevDays.
All right. See you
Bye-bye.
later. Bye-bye.